Hey everybody, how's it going? Is everybody having a good time? So before I get started, I have a couple of caveats. The first one is that I didn't know that we were in a creative communities section of our presentation today, and I expect that Kevin put me into creative communities because he wanted me to talk about the magazine project I do, which is that I bring together a bunch of collaborators and make a magazine about making one's living in creative communities, and we do the entire magazine quarterly from start to finish in 24 hours. And it would have been awesome if I had talked to you about that, but I'm not going to talk to you about that. So if that's interesting to you, you can talk to me about it later. The second caveat is that I have timed this, and I think it's going to go on time, but if it runs over, I won't be offended if you leave. I'm going to talk about burnout, which is something that I deal with a lot, actually. So I kind of want to, instead of talking to you about the practical resources for burnout, which you can find on the internet, there are so many great pieces of information and writings and help centers about burnout online and out there. My experience is that when I'm burned out, I don't give a shit about any of that, and it's very hard to go find those things. So instead of doing that, which you guys can do on your own, I want to talk to you about my personal experience with burnout and some of the things that I've figured out that help me get through the day and might help you. Quickly, before I get into that, I'm happy to give you guys sources later if you want them, but I'll give you definitions that I have of the differences between stress and burnout. We think of those two things as synonymous or as very closely linked a lot in creative communities, and they're actually very different in the ways that they affect people. Stress is characterized by over-engagement. It makes your emotions completely overactive. It produces urgency. I'm really just reading this. It produces urgency, hyperactivity. It makes you exhausted. It leads to anxiety disorders. And its primary damage is physical. It affects your body and the way that you get through the day. Burnout is characterized by disengagement. It means that your emotions are blunted. It makes you feel helpless and you feel hopeless. It leads to a loss of motivation, ideals. Instead of leading to anxiety, it often leads into depression. And its primary damage is emotional. Does that all make sense to everybody? Who here feels like they've experienced burnout? Almost everyone. So that's, sort of a clinical idea of what burnout's about. I'm not really an expert on this. I'm coming to you from about 2 months ago, being in the midst of my worst burnout ever. So a lot of this talk was me taking the opportunity to try and crystallize some of the things that I've learned over the years, over the past 3 months, the past 10 years, in a way that might make them stick, so maybe I don't burn out again. But so you have a context of where I'm coming from on this. So that's what burnout is described as. For me, what burnout feels like is, in the beginning, it's a loss of vision. It feels like I usually am very focused on where I want to go and what I want to do. If you were listening earlier, you heard me say that I try and have a very clear path to sustainability in my life and what I want my life to look like. Burnout is characterized by a loss of that path, a failure to draw motivation from that path. And it usually manifests as an inability to do simple tasks, even if I know that I need to do them, even if they are very simple, even if they're things like washing my dishes. To go through every day or look at my sink every day and say, not I don't want to wash my dishes today, but I'm actually incapable of washing my dishes today. I have absolutely no idea how to do that in a way that will get it done. In the midst of really deep burnouts, things that are really hard for me, where I was a couple of months ago, burnout for me is characterized by absolutely doing nothing. It means sitting around and sleeping and maybe eating, and watching TV and crying all the time. And that's it. And that can go on for anywhere from a couple of hours to a couple of weeks. And it's very miserable. The tail end of burnout, sort of the place that comes out of it when I start applying the techniques that I'm going to talk to you about and trying to get back into the world, is characterized by an inability to focus on things that are important. I will be able to do work, but not be able to do work that I need to do. I will shunt my attention towards whatever little thing is bothering me at that time. It's also characterized by an incredibly thin skin. It becomes really hard for me to meet new people or go to a party or come to a conference. This is really hard for me, actually. And I end up having to limit my social interactions in a way that's really hard for me as someone who draws a lot of energy from social interactions. So a little bit more. I have burned out a lot. Not as many times as I possibly could have because I'm getting better at taking care of myself. The first time I burned out, I was in undergrad. I was a junior. I was taking 7 classes. I was involved in 3 student clubs, one of them as the VP. I was costuming a show. I was prone to incredible bouts of procrastination followed by epic work sessions, like not writing a thesis for 2 months and then writing the entire thesis in 2 days sort of thing. And what I learned then is that many of my burnouts, my experiences with burnout, don't come about because of the stresses that I put on my life on a day-to-day basis. I know that I work really hard and I know that I'm a workaholic, but usually burnout comes to me when trauma is added to my stress. I tend to leave very little wiggle room to deal with emotional problems. So what happened was halfway through my junior year, my long-distance boyfriend who was in the Army was assigned to a tour in Iraq. And I basically sat down on the floor of my dorm room and I didn't move for 2 days. I was done. I was out of this world. That was hard. The second time I burned out, it was after working 200-hour weeks in a row, after having worked 3 months of 60 to 100-hour weeks to get through work every single day. And the most recent one was a combination of a lot of things, which we can talk about at some point, but they were a combination of working 100-hour weeks again, breaking up with a primary partner, moving out of my home, having 2 of my family members die. Lots of stuff. I don't really want to tell this story because I feel like I want you guys to feel bad for me. Like, I don't want you to feel bad for me. And I'm not trying to tell it because I want you to feel like I'm strong or I've done this. I'm trying to tell these stories because one of the things that I've learned is that if you don't learn how to deal with burnout deliberately, you will probably learn how to do so very badly. We, as artists, we don't live in a low-stress culture. We don't take on low-stress lives. We often don't leave little wiggle room for terrible things that happen in our lives and how we're going to deal with them financially, emotionally, from a time management perspective. I learned, growing up, kind of what I refer to as the New England method of self-care, which is shut up, quit whining, go back to work. Doesn't work. So here are some things I've actually learned about how to take care of myself when I am in burnout. They can also be applied to when you're approaching burnout, but we're going to talk about when you're in it. The first one for me is to create brain space, and sometimes also create physical space. Burnout is sometimes something that people think that they will just get by if they just keep going up and getting throughout their day and being like, okay, fine, I can do it. That is not true. That is like saying that your leg is broken, but it's cool, you can walk it off. It's not true at all. One of the things that I will do to make that happen is I will try and isolate for myself from the things that are burning me out. This most recent time, I ended up finally quitting a job that was really, really toxic to me while I was in the midst of burnout. Not because I needed to quit the job, although I did, but because I literally needed the brain space back to get past what that job was doing to me. The next one is calm the hell down. I have that written on lots of things. I said earlier this morning that I think that it's a fallacy for us to think of our lives as necessarily being huge and fantastic and wildly successful beyond all appropriate dreams. As I said, I run a magazine, and our most recent issue was about failure. I want to read you. I asked each one of our contributors, and I also did this myself, how do you define success? And I wrote, a month ago, if I had wanted to answer the question of how I define success, I would have said that I personally define success as owning a business or making a great salary or gaining national recognition. But now I feel like I'm learning how to redefine success as having the resources and the love and the community on a day-to-day basis to keep living in a way that makes me happy. That's what I mean when I say calm the hell down. I have a lot of people I know who go off on wild tangents about how they have to do everything. And to some degree, you don't. And we should know better. I really think we should know better. The next one that I use is I don't turn off, I distract myself. I don't think that it's wise to think of distractions as bad. actually. I think that sometimes we need to be distracted from the things that we're trying to deal with that are hard. And turning off for me is something like sitting and watching 12 hours of television. But distracting myself is something like sitting down and knitting 10 scarves in a row. Because at the end of the day, I like knitting, crocheting actually. I like making things, and for me, crocheting is very simple, it's very easy. There are probably things that you do on a day-to-day basis that are very simple and very easy and don't make you feel like you're wasting your time, like reading books, or playing music, or listening to music, or going for walks, or for me it's crochet and nail polish, painting my nails. 100 shades of nail polish, was not joking. During my past burnout, I probably knit enough scarves that I could send you all home with one. Like, really. I should have brought them and given them to you, because I don't know what I'm going to do with them. The next one is self-care. Self-care is kind of the whole point of my talk, but self-care is also something you do specifically, and it's probably defined best as deliberately doing the things you need to do on a day-to-day basis that keep you healthy and happy. Healthy and happy not always being the same. And that is things like getting enough sleep, and eating vegetables, and going outside. And it's hard to take care of yourself deliberately. It's really hard. So when I was in the midst of my most recent burnout, what I did is I made a list of things that I knew made me happy. And they were, I like to go outside, I like to be in the sunlight, I like to read books, and I like iced coffee. And so every day, once I started trying to be like, okay, I need to get out of this, this can't go on anymore, every day I would get up, and I would get dressed, and I would take a shower, and I would go outside, I would drive to, I was in Maine context, drive to our local coffee shop, and I would get a nice coffee, and I would drive back, and I would sit on our porch, and I would read a book in the sun. And I felt like if I could accomplish that every single day, then I could accomplish other things, and I would get better, and I would feel better. And it's much better to start one's day, if one's trying to get out of burnout, with things that make you feel good, than it is to start your day feeling terrible, like you just want to cry all the time. The next one is, if you don't take it from me, take it from yourself. Another way of saying this is, apply the advice you give to others to yourself, which, if you are anything like me, you are probably terrible at. A good example is, this past May, a friend of mine quit his job. He was having a really hard time with this job, and for all the time I've known him, he was always just miserable at this job, saying, well, I don't know where this is going to go, and I don't know what kind of career this is going to take me in, and they don't treat me well, and it's awful, and it makes me feel bad to go to work every day. And I would sit down with him and say, why haven't you quit your job yet? Not like you need to quit your job, but like, why haven't you quit your job yet? You know that you need to quit your job. And he finally did in May, and I was so proud of him, and he was so excited, and it was so good for him. And I was simultaneously in a job that was terrible, and that was toxic, and that was stressing me out, and that wasn't going anywhere. And he would say to me, why aren't you quitting your job? And I would say, well, because I can't, because these reasons. And I didn't have any better reasons than he did. I just felt like I couldn't do that for some reason. If you think about, this is the same thing as treating yourself as a friend. Like treating yourself the way you treat your friend. If your friend came to you and said, you know, I'm having a really hard time, and I have too much work, and I feel like I've gone from being really excited about what I do to not wanting to do things every day, you would probably have good advice for your friend. It would be, hey, maybe you need to slow down, or take a break, or take a vacation, or say no to some more things, or get outside more. But we don't tend to be able to do that for ourselves. And it's great to be able to think of yourself objectively and say, if I were a friend I was meeting for coffee, what would I tell myself to do? The next one is, I think it's important to publicly acknowledge when you're burned out, which is one of the reasons that I am giving this talk. And one of the reasons that, the reason I think it's important is because I think burnout is the thing that a lot of us deal with and feel ashamed of. Burnout is not uncommon in arts communities, not uncommon in most communities. But we have a hard time talking about it because people don't really know how to deal. But you can just publicly acknowledge that it's happening to you and that things are going to be different because of it. The example for me is, I came back to the city to do the 3rd issue of my magazine recently, and before I came back, I was having these problems of like, I haven't been able to work for all this time, and having a really hard time like trying to get back into the city and get back into what I need to do, and I haven't gotten advertisers for our magazine, and we haven't gotten like places to distribute it because I haven't been able to work. And I was freaking out about what my contributors were going to think of me. Thank you, Casey. And so I sent everybody an email, and the email just said, guys, this is what's happening. I'm having a hard time. It's personal. I understand that I am the person you're relying on for this magazine. I need you to understand that this issue's not going to be as big as we hoped it would be. And I'm going to acknowledge that. It's my fault. We're going to move by it. Thank you. That was it. And not only was that totally fine, even though it was really scary for me, it also meant that in like half an hour I had 4 people writing me back being like, how can I help you? Like, are you okay? What's going on? Like talk to me about how I can help this project. Talk to me about what's going on in your life. Talk to me about and every single person was like, yeah. Not even like, oh, that's fine, we understand, but like, yeah. But like, did you feel like you really needed to apologize to us in a way that was so like emotional? We don't care, we love you. We like doing things with you. And that was a good lesson for me. That was a very nice reminder of the community that I have. The next one is ask for help. Very much in the same way. Thank you, 5 minutes. Oh, I might be actually timing this well. I feel so proud. Ask for help is the next one. It's very similar to the idea of publicly acknowledging that you're burned out. You probably have a community if you're here. You probably have friends you can go to. You probably have someone you can talk to. And if you don't feel like you have someone you can talk to, there are resources available for you to talk. This is something that I think is good for people to do, and sometimes we think that it's way too dire and like sort of weird, but I think it's a good thing to have the number of a hotline in your home somewhere on a Post-it note or something. Not because I think that, I'm going to slip into suicide and need to have someone talk me off the ledge. I don't think that is what's going to happen, but because I know that if I ever get to a place where that is true, I will probably not be able to find those resources. So why not find them? Why not have them? Why not understand where they are? For me, asking for help this past time was, I was in Maine and I was trying to figure out a way to transition myself back into Community Action New York, which is for me a very high stress environment. I love it. It's very high stress. And I had an opportunity to go to LA with my partner. But I couldn't afford it. I just flat out could not afford it. Couldn't buy the plane ticket. And it's usually very against my grain to ask people for financial help. In this particular case, I was like, it's really important to me that I go to LA, but I can't afford the plane ticket. Can you afford the plane ticket? And he said yes. And we went to LA, and it was great. It was really, really good for me. And it was hard to ask for, but also completely very important. And my last point is, yet again, ask for help. No, really. Ask for help making a space. If a space is what you need, ask for help doing a project. If a project is what you need. If you have a job, ask your coworkers for help. One of the things that we think about is we think of our community of people who support us as our friends and our family. But if you are working a job and your job is burning you out, you have a community at your job that you should go to and say, hey, I'm burning out, help me. Like, that's one of the things that businesses do. For me, I went home. I called my parents and I said, hey, I need to stay with you for a little while. I need you to not ask me what's going on, just take care of me. And they did that, and I'm very lucky to have that. But you probably have a place like that or a person you could ask something like that from. It's nice to know, and it's good to feel able to ask without shame or guilt or worry, because if you have a community, you probably have a community that cares about you, wants you to continue to function, and will do what they need to do in order to keep you that way. I don't have a very good conclusion for this talk, so instead of trying to say something very wise in capstone to all of that, I will take questions for a few moments before we go to lunch if anyone has questions or wants to talk about personal experiences with burnout. Yeah?
So what about like re-engaging after you've gone through this whole process? Where in the coming out of it do you get like your passion back to?
Slowly. For me, slowly and day by day. Usually for me, the turning point on burnout is going from, I can't do this, to I am tired of not doing things. Like, I am at a point where not doing things is harder than doing them, even though it's really hard to do them. I think of burnout sometimes, like Jeff said, burnout as being sort of like being like you're underwater. Everything is very slow and very far away. And the moment when you come out is when you start thinking that you're rising to the surface. For me, re-engaging is a very slow process, and it usually involves me doing things like going from not wanting to do anything today to doing things like getting up and going outside and having iced coffee. And then it goes from getting up and going outside to having iced coffee to getting up, going outside, having iced coffee, sitting down and answering my email for half an hour, which I'm really bad at when I'm burned out. Like, it's really hard for me to do email. And then it's that plus working for a little bit. And then it's that plus working for a little bit and cooking a good meal. And you just build it back. I also find that something that helps me get out of burnout, once I have passed the stage where it's literally impossible for me to do things, is to get back into my community. Like, I came back to New York in part because there wasn't anyone really around for me in Maine, and it was hard for me to have conversations with people. So I came back to New York and started recharging by talking to people, and talking to my friends, and doing things like that. I also forced myself to recharge quickly because I had a magazine to run. But that was great for me. That was a really good project because I just had to show up, and everybody else was very good at what they did. And so that helped me a lot. I'm not suggesting that if you burn out, you conveniently schedule a concert for a month later so that you have to be better. But it helps to be able to say, come back to your community and say, maybe, I think I have the bandwidth to do something again. Can someone give me something to do? And then do it.